Hello and welcome to my second video tutorial about setting up dynamics. This time I'm going to show you how to use my SciWizard dynamic cloak prop. And this is going to be the same procedure for the Michael 4 version. At first we will need our Victoria. I'm going to show this on Victoria. And of course load the cloak. You will find the cloak in the props library of your poser runtime. Okay, now when we load the cloak, at first you do not see the backside, and this needs some adjustment in the render settings. You go to Render Settings, Preview, and uncheck the option Remove Back-Facing Polys. I have to say I'm working on Poser Pro 2014 and I do not know if all the lower Poser versions have this option. I believe Poser Pro 2012 has it, but you will have to look around to find this option. I'm only going to show it on my version as an example. Okay, now we've done this. The cloak is automatically parented to Victoria's body, so when I move her around, you see it stays in place. We need a 45 frame animation for the cloak. So click on the second frame window in your animation tab and enter the number. Now with Victoria selected, jump to frame 30 to apply a pose. I've chosen one of Lunch Lady's Pose Me for Promos, the number 5. And the cloak doesn't move because it's parented to Victoria's body and not to her chest or hip, and her body doesn't move in relation to the scene, so you will see no change there. Okay, going back to frame 1, and now we're going to go into the cloth room, setting up the simulation. Select your cloak, set up your simulation by clicking on the New Simulation button. Enter the end frame 45, check cloth self-collision. Now click on Clothify. You should have your prop cloak selected and it should show up in here, in your menu. Then next click on Collide Against, because you will have to tell Poser which objects the cloak should collide with. So these have to be the ground and Victoria herself, of course. You should not check any of these 3 ignore options because the head is inside the collision with the cowl up here, and the hands may be in there, and maybe the feet as well for this pose. But you can change the collision offset to 0.5, and this only takes care of the distance between Victoria, the ground, and the cloak. So the cloak can get a bit closer to these 2 objects to collide. If you leave the value up at 1, you might get some odd spikes or jags in the cloak when it simulates. Okay, so the cloak is already set up with some constraint groups. You do not have to adjust them, you do not have to set them, but I can show you where they are. When I click on Edit Constraint Group, I get this little panel down here, and you will notice these red dots on her shoulders and on the top of her head and in the back of this shoulder part, and there's another one back here. And these groups, these parts take care to keep those portions of the cloak in place when the simulation is running. So you do not have to do anything. This is already set up for you and was saved with the cloak. Now the only thing you will have to do is click on Calculate Simulation and wait for the simulation to play out. This will take a little while. Yes, you will get this status bar down here, and it will run through all the 45 frames. Okay, now after the simulation is finished, you will see that there are a few crumpled regions, like in this cowl section here, and in the back there is some intersection between the cowl and the main cloak. On the shoulders, and a part of the cowl is even disappearing into the main cloak. You can fix this with the Morphe brush. This cloak prop takes some work to be finished because it's pretty complex. You can see the differences here in mesh density. I've tried my best to avoid these little collision incidents, but I can only go that far. So I'm going to show you the tricks how to get rid of these and make the cloak look presentable for your renders. I'm going to use the morphing tool here, this hand with the extended index finger, and I'm going to use the smooth option. You can dial the size of the brush tool with the radius dial and the magnitude with its own dial. Magnitude means the strength of the brush. 1 is the maximum value, which will give you very quick results. And you can already see when I move the brush over here, the grayish parts, which mean that an underlying mesh is poking through the one on top. They start to disappear because I am relaxing and smoothing out the mesh. And when you alter your camera perspective to get a better view on the other parts, you can see more clearly where you're working. So I'm going to apply the smoothing brush where I need it, and this is going to take some time. So I will be moving this in fast forward so you can see what I'm doing here. You see the bottom part of the cloak is probably the worst, and it needs some patience to fix. I'm working on this first from the outside, and now I'm going to turn Victoria around and apply the morphing brush tool from the inside. And it can get rid of the most pronounced crumpling. So you can take your time with this step. Okay, and there are some zones I can easily apply from the inside, like this back of the cowl here. I can more or less push the trim out of the cloak. Okay, this is as far as I go now with this step. I'm going to close the morph brush because I'm going to use a different method. Sometimes Bowser will probably cause you some problems if you try to spawn a morph out of your new shape here. It may crash or even may duplicate the morph. So there are two different things you can do now. You can export this shape as an object and then import it back as a morph, or you can try to spawn a morph. I'm going to show you both methods. The first is to export your cloak shape as a morph. You go to File, Export, Wavefront Object, Single Frame. Uncheck everything in the scene and you should be looking for the cloak. It has to be hidden somewhere inside Victoria's structure because it's parented to her. You see it's almost at the bottom here. Only check this cloak. Say OK. And then check is morph target no world transformations, and check include existing groups and polygon groups and say OK. Then search for a directory you want to put your morph into. I've already done that. Save it. And now how to get this morph inside your cloak is go to the Properties tab, click on Load Morph Target and look for your morphed object. Okay. Now the morph is already copied into the cloak. Now what you have to do is you have to set the dynamics slider here to 0 because this defines the momentary shape. And you have to set the custom morph dial to 0 as well because this is the morph I created with the Morphe Brush tool. Both of these deformations have been saved in this new morph. And so if you set this to 1, you will get your old shape back. This is one way to go to use this. I'm going to show you the second way now. Setting goes to back. This is the easy way it's supposed to work. You simply select your cloak and go to Object, Spawn Morph Target, give this a name. I'm going to call this Cloak Sim 1, and you get this new dial down here set at 0. You're doing the same thing here. 0 out the dynamics, 0 out the custom morph, enter value 1 for your new morph. Now at this point sometimes Poser duplicates this and you get a very distorted shape, so you have this object export and import option as, I will say, a backdoor. Okay, now we have smoothed out everything we could without going to too much trouble, but these areas here do not look too good. So I have built a few adjustment morphs in this and fix morphs. So I'm going to try to use them. Here this one fix front cowl moves this section. See, it lifts it out. And the second one moves the midsection. We still get a bit of intersection going on here and can use the morphing brush on this, because now with the fixed morphs applied, this area of the mesh is more accessible, and that was a problem before because we couldn't get the morph brush to work on this area. Now you see my morph isn't really working. This is because I set the custom morph down here to 0. I do not need it anymore, but this custom morph is the container for my fixed morph. When I dial it up to 1, you see I'm getting this crumpling. This is the old fixed morph I created before creating this new one. So it interferes with my new shape. And I can just delete this one. And when I apply the morph brush, I will get a new one, also named custom morph. But now, since it's set to value 1, it works. And when I do this long enough, you see the intersection will disappear. Yes, I'm not going to put this to the full extent, but I think you get the idea. Well, there are a few parts which do not look too pretty. This here down below. So I'm using these fixed back cowl morphs to fix them. One for the left shoulder, and for the right shoulder, and for the sides to pull them out of the mesh of the cloak, and the bottom. And now this sticks into the hood. I'm going to lift the hood tip Now I've got a better base to apply the Morphe brush one final time. You see, this works. And you can get your smoothed out cloak by combining the spawn morphs option, the fix and adjustment morphs, and the morph brush tool. Now I'm aware that this dynamic cloak isn't a simply load and use prop. It's very complex, as I already said, and it needs some work to look good, but I think the end result you're getting here is worth the trouble if you're willing to explore these options. Okay, now looking nice. I'm going to show you the finished result in another prepared scene. Okay, when you open your scene with the simulation and morphs and everything, it will probably end up in frame 1. Start in frame 1, so you do not see any changes. You have to pull the animation slider to frame 45 to see your result. And this is what my completely post-worked, smoothed, morph fixed cloak looks like. Now you can apply textures and clothing and work with these fixes and adjustment morphs built inside the cloak to build your scene and finally render it. Okay, now I hope you find this little tutorial useful and it will get you some directions how to work with this cloak. The method I showed you is the same for the smart propped brooch, which is also part of the SciWizard package. And I hope to see and hear you again. I wish you happy rendering time and stay creative. Bye!